In this next lesson, we're going to talk about bass strum patterns. And these strum patterns are a good way to make your existing strum patterns sound more interesting and dynamic. And all we're doing is just adding a bass note to the strum patterns that we already know. So it's not going to be too difficult. Now, let's start with the G chord. And let's start with this rhythm here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go bass, down, down, and down. So I'm just putting the bass note on the first beat of that strum pattern. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right. So the way to find the bass in your chord is to look at your chord diagram and look at what the lowest note is in the chord diagram, and that's your bass note. In which case, the lowest note in a G chord is the 6th string. So I play that string first, or as my bass. Okay? Now let's take a sample chord progression. Let's go G, C, D to G. And if we look at the C chord in our chord diagram, the lowest note in that chord is the A string, because you'll notice there's an X over the E string in that chord diagram. So the A string is our bass note. Bass, down, down, up, down, up, bass, down, down, up, down. Right. Now if we go to a D chord, we notice in that chord diagram that both the E and the A string have X's above the nut in that chord diagram. And then the D string, there's a circle. So that is our bass note. It's the lowest note available in that chord. All right, so if I play a D chord, I've got bass, down, down, up, down, up. Now if I put those chords together, G, C, D, G, and apply that strum pattern, I get a little bit more of an interesting strum pattern than if I were just going to do down, 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 up, down, up. Okay, let's hear that. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, bass, down, 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 bass, down, 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 bass, down, 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 bass, down, down. And now what I can do is I can slightly change that strum pattern around. So for instance, instead of doing a downstroke on beat 2, I could do a down up stroke. For instance, bass, down, up, down, up, down, bass, down, up, down, up, down. Now, if we were to apply that to the sample chord progression, it would sound like this. Bass, down, up, down, up, down, bass, down, up, down, up, down, bass, down, up, down, up, down, bass, down, up, down, down. Right. So these small tweaks to the strum pattern can just add some more interest to whatever strum pattern you're doing. Now if I take a half note and then a quarter and 2/8 notes, our strum pattern would sound like this. Maybe would be more appropriate for a ballad. Bass, down, down, a bass, 2, down, down, bass, 2, down. Now if I applied that to the sample chord progression, it'd sound like this. 3, 4. Right. Okay. Now you don't always have to use just one bass note within the strum pattern. You could put in 2 or more bass notes. So let's say we put a bass note on beat 1 and 3, and then downstrokes on beat 2 and 4. So if I were just to hang out on a G chord, it would sound like this. Bass, down, bass, down, bass, down, bass, down. If I applied that to the sample chord progression, it would sound like bass, down, 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 bass, down. Right. And In this next lesson, we're going to talk about bass strum patterns. And these strum patterns are a good way to make your existing strum patterns sound more interesting and dynamic. So that's a good thing to practice, are these variations with the bass strum patterns and the basses in different spots, like 1 and 3 especially. Okay. Now, you can also apply these bass strum patterns to 3/4 time or waltz time. So for instance, if I took all quarter notes in a waltz, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and put the bass on beat 1, you'd get this strum pattern. Now let's start with the D chord and hang out there. D, 2, 3, D, 2, 3, D, 2, 3. Now let's take a sample chord progression from Paradise by John Prine, which is 2 measures of D to 1 measure of G, back to a measure of D, then again 2 measures of D, a measure of A, back to D. Sounds more complicated than it is. But let's apply that waltz strum pattern with the bass on the first beat. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, bass, 2, 3, bass, 2, 3, G, 2, 3, D, 2, 3, D, 2, 3, D, 2, 3, A, 2, 3, D, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3, bass, 2, 3, bass, 2, 3, G, 2, 3, D, 2, 3, D, 2, 3, D, 2, 3, A, 2, 3, D, 2. And you could experiment with some different rhythms in waltz time too. So for instance, if I did 2 eighth notes on beat 2 or a down up stroke, I would have D, 2 and 3, D, 2 and 3, G, 2 and 3, D, 2 and 3, D, 2 and 3, D, 2 and 3, A, 2 and 3, D, 2 and 3. Or if I did 2 quarter notes and 2 eighth notes, right? Bass, down, down, up, I could get another interesting strum pattern. Bass, down, down, up, 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 bass. So you can see that adding a bass to your strum pattern, you can get a lot more interesting strum patterns by using that method. All right, so practice some of these, give those a try, and enjoy. All right.